Hey guys, JC Smith here. Today we're back on the V10. We got all our parts back, so we're hoping to get this thing together today. At least get the motor in. I got a late start, had some stuff to do this morning. So first things first, in order to get the block ready for the heads to go on, it's a good time to re-inspect all your pistons, roll the motor over, look at the cylinder walls, make sure nothing goofy happened in the time that you put it together and we took the heads back off. So we've done that. We've wiped all the cylinders down so they're nice and clean. Next step is I got to clean out all the bolt hole passages in the block, because when you take the heads off, the coolant passages are right next to it and above it, so it gets coolant down into the bolt hole. So what will happen is when you run the bolt down into the hole, there'll be coolant down there and it tries to compress the coolant and you won't get a proper torque because it'll hydrolock. So I've adapted a blowgun. Let's see if I can show you. I've taken this blowgun and I basically put a piece of brake line on it so that I can take the brake line and I can shove it all the way down in the bottom of the hole, because it's pretty deep. As you can see, that's how deep that is. Okay, so I stick this in here, I take a towel over it, and I take and just blow from the bottom up and bring it out. Careful, because when you get to the top you still have coolant in the passage next to it, so I try and make it to where I'm blowing just the bolt hole, and I'll do every single hole until nothing else comes out. And then right about the time I think I've got it right, I've done this several times so far. As soon as I think I've got it right, I'll go ahead and spray a little brake parts cleaner in here. This is my brake parts cleaner of choice. I really like this stuff. This is made by Johnson's. It's inexpensive and it's got a good spray and it's strong. So I'll spray that down in there, and that because it evaporates. So I'll put a little bit in each one so I get the antifreeze coating out of there. And then I'll blow them out again. Doesn't take a lot. I'm just trying to clean the threads up from the antifreeze, because my next step when I put the heads in, I'm going to put the bolts, I'm going to dip them in oil so the threads aren't dry putting it together. So as you can see, just do a little bit more. That's all brake parts cleaner. And I'm not putting a lot of air pressure. I'm not looking to blow it clear across the shop. But you get the point. Continue on, get it done. I'm going to go ahead and do this and do the other side, and then I'll clean the head up and we'll bring you back. Okay, so when I clean up the cylinder head, I use a razor blade to get the big stuff, and then I use one of these 3M roll-lock discs. These are plastic, so they don't take any metal off. A lot of times on cast iron, I'll usually use what we call cookies, because they look like an oatmeal cookie, and they're a little more abrasive than this. But I just use that on here, and the same thing on the cylinder head. It's aluminum, so I'll go over and clean all this back up again before I install the exhaust studs. I'm going to put these new exhaust studs in, and I'm going to put never seize on them. So if they would happen to break, they're a little easier to get out. They probably won't break in this lifetime of this truck. So let me get this ready to go, and we're about ready to set heads on them, so we'll bring you back. Okay, so these head gaskets, there's a left and a right. And the reason I buy these ones, if you didn't see my other video about my parts, the reason I buy these from Rock Auto is because of right here. Look right here. See if you can make that out. It says Pomoco right there. So these are original equipment Ford head gaskets. There is a right and a left to the head gaskets, so you have to buy a left and a right. So sometimes you can save some money by doing a little research, I guess, if you want to call it. Let's see if I got these right. There we go. So there's different places I'll spend money to get, a certain brand or certain quality, and there's other places it doesn't matter. Like the valve covers on these, that gasket is a pretty forgiving gasket. and it's not hard to get to. So that, I really don't care. That doesn't need to be forward. But head gaskets, it's a big deal, because if you cheap out, go with a cheap gasket, and you put it all together, once you torque the head bolts, they're torque to yield, which means they're a stretch bolt. So once you torque that, it's done. You can't take it apart, change a head gasket, use head bolts again. You gotta get new ones, because they're one-time use. So I'm sure some guys do, I don't. Most of the time they grind the Ford logo off. That one they didn't. But regardless, that's why we buy these. And that saved me probably about $45. So it was well worth it. And there's a lot of things that are like that, but you gotta pick and choose. So I'm gonna get the other head ready to go. And then we're gonna set these on, and we'll talk about torquing the heads. Now, typically if you were doing this, if you had a thread chaser, you'd want to go down through the bolt holes for the heads, and you'd also want to, you saw me clean the fluids out of them, all the liquid, you'd also want to chase the threads. Now this has already been apart, all the threads are clean, so let's get the head dressed, we'll get ready to put them on. Be close. There we are. Should be her. Right there. Alright, so you saw me clean the bolt holes out. Next what I'll do is I'll just dip the threads in oil, so when I put them down in there and go to torque them, they're not, the threads aren't dry. You don't want a lot. I'll just put it on there and let it kind of drip. There's a lot, I'll go ahead and put some on the other. But the whole point is just not to have dry threads. I don't want to torque on dry threads, but I don't want so much oil in here that too much down in the hole. That's why I usually shut my phone off. Anyways, before we got so rudely interrupted by the telephone that rings nonstop, just a little bit of oil. I don't want a lot, just enough that the threads aren't dry. So when we torque it, you get a good even torque. That's all I'm after. Anyways, I'll run these down just snug. Basically just till the bolt touches. I'll start in the middle. Work my way out. This isn't the actual torque sequence, so it's not really a big deal. It's just to get it snugged up on there. But next we'll get the other head on, and then we'll do the torque sequence on these, which I'll look spec up. I got my computer down here, so I can bring that up in just a minute. But anyways, that's how I set it in. Let me get the other side ready, we'll bring you back. Alright, so this is the Ford service manual that I use. It's for this engine and this year. This is all the specialty tools you need. That's the oil, any of your special lubricants. And then what we're after in this is the torque sequence for the heads. Okay, so it tells you, basically we start at the bottom. This is the front of the engine, passenger side, passenger side, driver side. We'll start on the passenger side. We'll go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So you see what it is? It's going from the middle up, you know, just working your way out. So we're going to do that. We got to do it in 3 steps. Okay, you can see here, it's, on this particular one, it says tighten to 30 foot-pounds, and then go an additional 90 degrees after that. All right, so I've got a process that I use because I don't have a torque wrench. All right, so what I do is I take on the head bolts If I find a good example you guys can see on, you can see that right there. That's a chisel mark. And what I do is I torque the first time to 30 foot-pounds, like they ask, and then after it's torqued to 30 foot-pounds, I chisel a mark at 12 o'clock. And then I do all of them. After I've torqued all of them down, I put a chisel mark on every single one at 12 o'clock. And then I go back to the sequence at number 1, which I don't know if it was right here, and then I do 90 degrees, which would make it 3 o'clock. And then I go through the whole torque sequence again, checking and making sure that all of them end up at 3 o'clock. And then I start again, do additional 90 degrees, so I should end up, just like this one, at 6 o'clock. Now, the reason I do this is because if for any reason I get off and lose my place or end up skipping 2, I usually count when I'm doing it, so I make sure I get them all, right? But if I do happen to get off and lose my place, I can see if I had one that was at like 3 o'clock or something, I would know I missed those, so I have to be careful. So that's what I do. Now, another thing, they tell you in the procedure you have to go back into the other procedure, so this is kind of tricky. So right now I'm talking to you about valve clearance in relationship to where the pistons are, the orientation of the piston. They want you to take out certain or leave out certain cam followers. Like in this diagram, they're telling you to install the ones with the arrows only, leave the other ones out. I find that it's easier for me to just leave the spark plugs out and leave all the lash adjusters out, so I take no chance while I'm setting the timing and putting the chain on of any valve coming into contact with the top of a piston. So I just leave them all out. They're not hard to put in. It does take a tool. This is a tool it takes to put them in. It takes a little bit of time. It'll probably take me about a half an hour. Probably half an hour to put all of them in. And that's 30 cam followers. So it's not really all that hard. So I leave them out. I like to do it this way. I don't know if it's the best way. You make your own decision. But what I do is I bring my timing mark up using the special tool that I've showed you before. And then I start putting my timing together after I've torqued the heads down. The last thing I'm going to do is put the cam followers in. So that's where we're at. That's what we're going to do. Alright, when I put this motor together, I had replaced these. So these had, what, 20 minutes of running on them? I'm obviously not going to replace them. So I need to get these set back so that I can actually put it together. So to set the tension again, I just stick it back in a vise and just take your time. It is a hydraulic cylinder. Don't go too hard. Just take your time and go slow, because the oil is going to come out of that tip right there or out of the bottom. I just want to go real gentle, like we're pushing this piston back inside the tensioner. Real easy, nice and smooth. I like my sawdust oil dry. You know, that was totally planned.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I was drilling out a hammer handle. That's what that is. All right, so once it gets back in so far, there's a ledge right there, a lip on the piston. Can you see that? See that lip right there? I have to get that in far enough to get this retainer to slide down in like this. So what I need to do is get this retainer around this part of the tensioner. You see how it just slides right in there? And when I release it from the vise, it holds that little shoulder of the piston out. And I'll make sure that's all clean before we put it together, and then we'll put it back on. Okay, so I've got my bottom timing mark lined up here. You can see that by the black. Look way down here. You see this black mark right here? How it's spread across. It's like right on the dot. Can you see it? Here to here. Okay. So I put that on and then come up here with the tensioner out. I get the chain on. The way this should be is this chain is supposed to straddle this dot. So you got to leave your tensioner out while you do this. Now, with the keeper in that we just showed you, now you take this, put this back in place. I'm going to run it in real quick. Don't forget torque to spec. All right, and let me do this side. Now, I've already got this one laid out here. Usually what I need to do is do this one last. You need to put the chain on the bottom first. Grab that. Line it up. You want to be sure you got the driver's side on perfect, because if you don't, you'll have to take this side back apart to get to it. So we want to go right on that dot, and then up here we want this one to straddle that. Okay. And then what we do is put this guide in the bottom, and all of these were new when we first put this motor together, so I'm not replacing the timing components. So we slide that up underneath here and then start these. It's very important that this piston rests right inside. See how it rests in that guide there? It's very important. If it's not sitting right, sitting like that, it'll just break. If you notice, I'm not really torquing that. I'm just snugging it down. Now, what we have to do is we have to torque all the guides and the tensioners before we pull these loose. Okay? That'll be our next thing we do. And it'll take up all the slack in the chain. And these are oil fed. So the galley behind here feeds engine oil pressure into these. So that's what keeps tension on the chain. So if you have a V10 or a 5.4 that starts up and you hear that rattle for the first few seconds until the oil pressure gets up, this is what you have. It could be this, it could be loose over here, smacking the chain, the timing cover. Usually what happens is a seal on the back of these timing covers, or these tensioners, will blow out. Instead of all the oil pressure holding tension on the chain, it loses oil in here when you shut it off, and it drains out. So when you start it up, it has to refill this cavity and create pressure before it puts tension on the chain. So that's why you hear that rattling noise. So, okay, let me get this stuff torqued down. We'll pull the retainers out as soon as I'm torqued into place, and we'll be ready to put the timing cover on. Now, the torque spec on this is 89 inch-pounds, so make sure you listen for it. Check this one again. Up here. Good. Now we got this one. There's no tension on the chain, so we're getting a good torque. One more time here. And here. Pretty good. All right. Change my torque wrench over. 18 foot-pounds. Okay, that's ready to go. So now we can pull that. Watch how it takes the slop out of the chain. And that's a spring in there with hydraulic pressure also. So you see how tight it is now. So now everything lines up perfectly. This is exactly right. This is exactly right. And it is exactly right down here. Okay? So I'd rather not move it around. If you ever go to do this, don't use these, because a book will tell you like about 11 o'clock for this mark and about 12 o'clock. And if you went by that, you'd be wrong. So get the tool that sets this in correctly, and then you can do it the way it should be done. Okay, we'll get the timing cover on now. We should go back together pretty quick. check everything over before you get done, but don't forget this. This is the trigger wheel for the crank sensor, which comes in on this side. And if you notice, you got even spacing all the way around, and then you have a large gap. This large gap tells the ECM that's when number 1 is on top dead center for its index. And it goes just like this. Make sure you put it in the right way. If you put it in the wrong way, it'll be chewing into your chain here. You see how that works? So make sure you get your fingers going out. Make sure it's good and clean. And then push it all the way to the back, like that. Double check everything once or twice, and let's put her back together. Okay, so we're putting timing cover on, so there's a few places that you need a little bit of silicone, RTV, right here, which you don't need a lot. I mean, you're just filling a crack. Here, again, just a little bit. Same thing right here. This is where the head meets the block. A little bit right there. We don't want so much that it's falling off and ending up in the oil pan. So sometimes I'll just take and pull a little bit off if it's too much. Just get it out of there. Just like this. This is a little more than I need, so I'll just pull that out. I'd rather take some off than end up in my oil pan in the pickup tube after time. Okay, the rest of this looks pretty good. I don't like that little stringer there. I wipe everything down with with the brake parts cleaner so that the RTV will stick to it. And then we're ready to put this on. We've already cleaned the back of this, so it's all ready to go. And just kind of line it up here, get her where she belongs. I'll start all these by hand. Make sure they're all lined up, and then we'll go ahead and torque them down. Then we got 4 bolts up from the bottom, from the oil pan up. Make sure we get them. So let me get these tightened up and move on to the next thing. Alright, it's all back together as far as the internals go. Idler pulleys on, tensioner pulleys on. I gotta get the power steering pulley pump back on there. But I got the balance shaft in, all the cam followers are in, and this is assembly lube. We put a good amount on there so that we can run it over, make sure it's got lube in it. Do the same thing here. This is what's called a balance shaft. They use it on this V10, apparently to smooth the idle maybe. It's the way I understand it. But when you line these up, you have to go through this little bitty hole. You see that mark there? There's a corresponding mark on the balance shaft. You got to line those up. It can be a little bit tricky because you see they're angle cut on the teeth, so you kind of got to lay it down in there and judge and guess, but it worked out pretty well. I'm going to go ahead and button this up, but before I go too far, I'm going to do a compression test on all the cylinders and make sure we got good compression and everything works before I go any farther. Just in case we have any troubles, I'm not going to be tearing this back apart after the cab's on. So that'll be next, but that's tomorrow because it's getting late. It's late. I'm hungry. I didn't get an early start on this like I wanted to. It was almost 11 something, 11:30 when I come down here to start on it. And then a couple other things come up, so I didn't get a really good start on it. But nonetheless, the heads are back on, everything's back in. We'll do a compression test first thing in the morning, make sure everything's good. We'll do a leak down, make sure everything seals good. If everything's good, we'll put spark plugs in it, put the valve covers on it, and we'll button it up. But that's it for today. That's all we got. So we'll catch you guys in the next one. So if you like what we're doing, give us a thumbs up. We appreciate it.
Please leave your comments below and hit click the subscribe button if you want to.
All right, guys. We'll catch you on the next one.